Hello and welcome to the world of literature. I am your host with the series 100 FP, 100 famous novels from English literature. In this series, we have been recently dealing with the plays from English literature, and in this episode of 100 FP, we will be dealing with the play The Birthday Party by Harold Pinter. Now, The Birthday Party is one of the famous plays written in the early decade of 1950s. The play is called as the Comedy of Meanness. It is also included in the list, or it also belongs to the absurd theatre. It finds its place in the list of the plays like Waiting for Godot, or Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. Waiting for Godot, of course, is written by Samuel Beckett. So let's study or go through the plot of the play The Birthday Party. Let's take up the characters from the play Birthday Party by Harold Pinter. The characters would be, there are only few characters in the play actually. We have Meg Bowles. She is a kind woman in 60s, described as an absent-minded and simplistic. We have Patty Bowles. He is a man in 60s. He's a husband to Meg actually. He's the owner of a run-down boarding house where this play would be set. We have Stanley Weber, who can be considered as a protagonist of the play. He's described as a man in late 30s, and he's the boarder at the Bowles, and he would be the central figure from the play. We have Lulu. She is a woman in her early 20s, not that significant in the context of the play or in the plot development, but yes, she has a role to play. We have Goldberg. He is described as a Jewish man in 50s, and he works for an unnamed organization. We have Dermot McCann. He is an Irish man of 30, and he is member of an unnamed organization. These were the characters from the play Birthday Party, and next we will be dealing with the plot of the play Birthday Party. Now, coming to the plot of the play Birthday Party, Birthday Party is divided into 3 acts, and in this episode we will be dealing with the first act of the play The Birthday Party by Harold Pinter. Now, coming to the first act of the play, the first scene of the first act of the play is set in the living room of a seaside boarding house in 1950s England. Now, most of the action of the play will take place in this boarding house. First up, we are introduced to Patty. Patty is described as the owner of the boarding house and his wife Meg, and we are told that both Patty and Meg are in their 60s. Now, they are sitting in the living room table and engage in tepid conversations while eating breakfast. Now, here we are given some more information about the play, about the beginning of the play, or when does the play actually begin. So it begins in the early morning, since the 2 characters who have been introduced first up are having breakfast, and we are also provided information about the characters. For example, the dramatist would tell us that Meg is an inquisitive character who peppers Patty with repeated questions concerning his food, his job, his life, and everything. And on the other hand, Patty always remains quiet. He does not prefer answering the question of Meg. For example, when Meg would come and ask him about Stanley, he remains quiet. He does not answer any of the question regarding Stanley or any other questions that Meg has to ask Patty. In return, Patty informs Meg that 2 gentlemen will soon arrive to stay at the boarding house whom he met the night before. Now, at this news, Meg is flustered at first, but quickly recovers to promise that she will have a room ready for them. Now, again, it's important, the characterization is important of the play. For example, how are the characters being introduced? First up, we were introduced straightforwardly to the two characters, Meg and Patty, but now the other characters from the play would be introduced through these two characters, that is Patty and Meg. For example, now Patty informing Meg about two strangers is also an information that is being provided to the readers, that two characters will be introduced soon in the novel, and they would be very significant in context of the development of the plot. Furthermore, there is a lot of ambiguity and anonymity in the play, because you need to remember that this particular play, The Birthday Party, belongs to the genre of the absurd theater, and it also belongs to it is also considered as a comedy of meanness. So considering it an absurd play, you have to keep these elements in mind, which are actually the trademark or hallmark of absurd play, which at the top of the characteristics is the ambiguity in dialogues, ambiguity in themes, ambiguity in characters, ambiguity in plot, and that is something that we have so far witnessed in the initial scenes from Birthday Party. Next up, we are introduced to Stanley Weber. Now, Stanley Weber is the central figure from the play, and he can also be considered as the protagonist of this particular play. Now, Stanley Weber is the boarder, and we are told again through Patty, that he is asleep upstairs. Meg calls him, but he doesn't respond. She goes upstairs to fetch him and then returns a bit disheveled but amused. And we are again given information about Stanley. Stanley is a person who wears glasses. He is uncapped. He is unfriendly man in his 30s. After a while, Stanley comes out of his room, and Patty and Stanley, they speak of uninteresting topics while Meg prepares cornflakes and fried bread for Stanley's breakfast. After Patty leaves for work, the atmosphere changes. Meg flirts with Stanley, who jokingly calls her succulent while criticizing her housework. When Meg becomes affectionate, he rudely pushes her away and insults her. Meg then informs him that two gentlemen are coming. The news unsettles Stanley, who has been the only boarder for years. He accuses Meg of lying, but she insists that she speaks the truth. Now, this is another important aspect. Now, again, those two gentlemen, those two strange men are introduced, and they are putting the existing characters in trouble. For example, when Patty informed Meg about those two characters, Meg was initially somewhat disappointed with the news. We don't know why she reacted in that manner to news about those two persons. And now again, when Meg informs Stanley about those two strangers who are coming to stay at the boarding house. Now, Stanley is also upset at this news, but we do not know the exact reason why they are upset. For example, maybe for Stanley, he is upset because he is a boarder there for years, and he may be feeling insecure that if someone else comes, he may take his place. That is one of the reasons that we can find out for Stanley being upset. Now let's see who those two characters are and what impact would they make in the development of the play. Here, Meg exits and another character from the play, Lulu, appears. Now, Lulu is a young girl in her 20s. She arrives with a package. Now, this package would be important in the context of the absurdity of the play, or in context of the play being called an absurd drama. Meg comes across Lulu and she instructs her to keep the package from Stanley. So here we come to know that this particular package that Lulu has actually brought has something to do with Stanley, and later Meg exits the scene. Now we have Lulu and Stanley. They chat for a while, mostly about Stanley's lack of enthusiasm and his appearance. Lulu calls him a washout and then quickly exits. Stanley goes, he washes his face in the kitchen and then leaves by the kitchen door. Goldberg and McCann enter the living room. Now they are the two gentlemen who had requested rooms for the evening. Now we are introduced to those two anonymous, to those two ambiguous characters, and they happen to be Goldberg and McCann. Now these were the two characters who were highly talked about in the beginning of the play. Patty talked about these two men with Meg, and then Meg discussed these two men with Stanley. So finally the names of these two characters are revealed in the form of Goldberg and McCann. Now as soon as Goldberg and McCann appear on the set, we realize that they have come to finish a job. But information of the job are scarce, but evidently it seems related to Stanley. Now they have come there for Stanley, and they have something to do with this guy Stanley. Goldberg, he reassures McCann that they are at the right house and that this job will cause less stress than their jobs usually cause them. Now Goldberg, he rambles on about his uncle until Meg arrives and they introduce themselves. Now we are getting into the story of this particular play, that these two characters who have just appeared on the scene, that is Goldberg and McCann, they happen to be significant in the development of the plot, and Stanley, who was initially introduced as a character of no use, happens to be significant in the development of the plot. Goldberg is described as a person with a sweet character and sweet temperament and safe demeanor. Meg feels comfortable in his company. Now strictly, Goldberg asks about Stanley, and Meg tells him that Stanley was once a successful pianist but had to give it up. Meg also reveals that it's Stanley's birthday, and Goldberg suggests that they have a party. The idea of party thrills Meg, and she shows the gentlemen to their room. Later, Stanley returns to the living room as Meg arrives to put the groceries away. She informs him about the two gentlemen and tells him that Goldberg and McCann are their names. Now Stanley is visibly upset to learn Goldberg's name. Now to cheer him up, Meg suggests to open his birthday present. Now this present was actually bought by Lulu, through a package in the beginning of the play. Even though Stanley insists that it is not his birthday, now to humor Meg, he opens the package and finds a toy drum with drumsticks. Now, what will he do? A man in late 30s being presented with a birthday gift of a toy drum and drumsticks. Now what he does, he hangs the drum around his neck and parades around the table, beating the drum merrily until his rhythms become erratic and chaotic. He beats the drum possessively and looms over Meg with a crazed expression on his face. Now it is here that the first act ends. Now if we have a review of this particular act, now what we have in this act is that most of the characters that would be significant in the context of the play are introduced in the first act. Patty is introduced, Meg is introduced, and then through Patty and Meg other characters are introduced. For example, Stanley Weber is introduced, who would be a significant character in the context of the play, the development of the plot. Goldberg and McCann are introduced, Lulu is introduced. And we also, get some evidence of the plot or get some clues about the plot, that this plot will be dealing with three people or three characters from the play, that is Stanley Weber, Goldberg and McCann. Now, we'll go through in the second episode through the second act of the play and come to know how does the play develop and what would actually Goldberg and McCann do at the boarding house. That was all from the first act of the play, The Birthday Party. In this episode, we dealt with the first act of the play, The Birthday Party. We went through some important aspects of this first act, and up next in the second episode, we will be dealing with the second act of the play, The Birthday Party by Harold Pinter.